Hi, everyone. Welcome to Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm your host, Marisa B. Today, I would like to introduce you to feminist artist, filmmaker, and librarian whose work explores the intersections of accessibility, identity, and creativity across multimodal platforms. Let's welcome Andie Marshall. Hi, Andie. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be here and to join you.
No, you're quite welcome. The first thing I'd like to ask you is, how did you get started in art? Why did you decide to use art to speak to the world? Hi, everyone. Marisa B here from Radiant Living. If you like what we're doing and want to keep the conversations going, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every time we upload a video. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That's a really good question, actually, and I appreciate it. The short version, it could be a long answer, but essentially, some years ago, I was working as a researcher in another life. I was then a career academic, and the research I was doing feminist research around STEM learning. And so we're working with children, marginalized communities, um, girls. The study I was part of targeted female students or girl students only, between the ages of I'd say 9 to 13. And we were working with different populations in Philadelphia. And one thing we noticed is that um, they really were interested in maker culture and making things. So when we introduced those elements as part of the study I was in, things really bloomed. And I really was having fun learning with the kids. Things like manual manual skills like sewing. We sewed soft circuits. We used, electronic thread. We laid down LED lights. We taught them coding. It was really, and I really began to be really fond of it and really was late to the party on maker culture but I began spending a lot of time in maker spaces. And essentially what happened was I discovered that I was fascinated by learning as a researcher, but I really was fascinated by creativity as problem solving. And I guess when I say I'm a multimodal artist, multimodal is just, you know, I guess, if you have your audition, but if you don't, it's a fancy term for, in my opinion anyway, multiple functions. So creativity can be applied in many ways, as I've heard on your show, discussed by lots of folks doing lots of different things. And as a feminist artist, that's where it all began for me, really. I was looking at folks who had to really wanted to tell their stories. And, these stories were all really valuable, So I was learning with children, which made it really, really, really valuable. And I was able to play like they were playing. I was able to experiment and kind of lose my adult facade and veneer. And I would say things like, I don't understand that either. How did you do that? And it was when you can ask questions, I think it's a really powerful thing when you're not afraid to be unsure, when you're not afraid to say, I don't know what that means, or can you help me? And as a feminist artist, I know often, we talk about feminist art in particular, and we can say warrior woman, um, strength, and we have those things, but we also have questions, and they're really valuable because that's the heart of how you build new knowledge.
You
So
also
I'm
use
question.
your art for
Sorry.
you use your art for so much more though, right? I mean, because you use your art for health, for healing. You use your art to explore topics, technology. um, especially technology, the digital age. I mean, yes, it's feminist art, but you're speaking to a lot of topics in a lot of multi-dimensional ways, right? Multi modalities that you're putting together.
Thanks for that, because I think sometimes there's a point where I find that if I get too meta, um, I'm not sure what this. There should be, in the way I think, it's not for everyone, but I need a main idea, and it doesn't have to be in bold print. But I've noticed that if I don't have just even the slightest hint of a main idea, I can go down rabbit holes and I'll be in Wonderland forever.
Mhm.
It's really it's tangents or something I follow as an artist and a librarian too, with great resolve.
Your message speaks, well, at least it spoke to me tremendously. The concept of um, the digital age, the concept of the internet. I found it fascinating that you took yourself off of all social media. It's funny because especially doing this program and giving a voice to everybody or allowing everyone's voice to be heard and how they can be contacted, it is the social media age, it is the internet age. So most of the contacts are over the internet or through social media. And then when I was looking, I'm like, oh gosh, she has no social media contacts, no internet um, give and take with others. So, but you do speak to that. I found it fascinating that you took yourself off and yet you still use, for example, you still use film, you still record, you still use your phone to actually the phone was something that really was something that gave me great um, pause and great thought at the same time with the voyeurism and the watching us,
Oh,
and we don't really realize that, it's so you do speak to, yes, feminist issues, yes, identity issues, but you speak to what's really timely on the planet, what's going on now with us.
thanks. I really appreciate that because I think it's often, especially because I came sort of, I like to call it, I became an analog anchorite in 2020. I killed all my social media. They were, so, um, I guess some of my creativity was born in, I mean, I'm definitely a lurker online, for sure. Um, but it was a lot of that, especially like you're kindly referring to my first film that I made a few years ago. It was made in isolation. And I would say that when you don't have a constant community or conversation that we're all used to now, in digital spaces at least, there are strange things that do occur with how you think about yourself as a digital subject. And I know that in like 10, 15 years ago, there was a huge discussion online about the quantified self. And because I moved in tech circles and research at the time, it was referred to kind of the qualitative researchers like me would refer to it as something almost surrealist, absurd,
Mhm.
like it wasn't quite, we couldn't quite grasp how quantifying everything, every unit, every person, every living thing was the only perspective to look at or to understand something or to build something, right? Um, and I guess because it was through illness that I discovered my phone perceived me, or the security suite software perceived me as an interloper to myself. The idea that your devices can be custodial and that your data, once it's shared, is not yours alone. When it goes into the cloud, when it goes in, I mean, now that we have AI transcriptions for meetings, even Zoom meetings, this is really it's really thrilling. On the one hand, as a nerd, I find it fantastic, and
Hmm.
really, what can we do and achieve? On the other hand, I don't know if I still think about those photos I shared in my first film that my software security suite took of me in the throes of migraine flares, and I don't know if you know what the trade-off is there. What was the
Mhm.
trade-off? And because I was basically a living thing that makes mistakes, perceived by artificial intelligence to be an interloper or a virus, even,
Hmm.
when you think about that too. And when you think about a virus, they're living things too in the organic sense, aren't they?
Right.
And
Yes, of course.
the idea that we need to clean everything up also disturbs me a bit too, which is
Yes,
why,
that speaks to feminism, right? And speaks to women in general, because um, we see so much cleaning up of the female form with, especially with AI, right? Because women are supposed to look a certain way. And so it's cleaning up if it doesn't fit the
it doesn't fit.
definition, right? The definition that it, right, or the ethers or technology believes it should be. And that's kind of frightening. And yet we see it unfolding in front of us with
Very
AI,
true.
with changing photographs, changing the look, changing the size, changing the age, primarily of women.
Changing the age, primarily of women. I was also thinking about when you said that things like revenge porn or deep
Hmm.
fakes, the way that
Yes.
you know female forms in particular are susceptible to being construed as it, not pronoun of their preference, we'll
Right.
say. And I guess that's already, I mean, we live it every day, don't we? And to
Hmm.
see it reproduced in the digital world constantly is something that really kind of like gets the gumption in my guts, fired
Hmm.
up.
But and it's funny because as I've had on artists and individuals that have come on and speak about how creativity, how art, whatever form that art takes, is healing, but yet on the other hand, or may have healed them through their use or through their viewing of art or dancing or music. But then at the same time, we're almost not allowed to be ill. And that's what I found so fascinating about your film and photography on your migraines, because I feel like the I guess the technology is making everyone, especially the feminine, look perfect. You're not allowed to be old, you're not allowed to be sick, you're not allowed to be heavy, you're not allowed to have a bad day. You're supposed to be a
A
certain way
bit.
all the time, right? And they'll fix you. It'll fix you according to what it
Oh,
believes to
yeah.
be fixed.
How absolutely arbitrary and patriarchy reproduced in such a way. It's absolutely, it like screams deconstruct me.
Yeah.
That's very 90s feminist of me, but it's really um, the idea that, I mean, truthfully, I know I'm older, I'm in my early 50s, and I know I'm sick, and that's not going to change. I'm curvaceous, and that's not going to change
Hmm.
today unless I wanted to.
Right.
But I think it's also, I when I think about how much is contained in terms of the face, especially for women. One of the reasons that I took a lot of photographs that I've collaged into another project.
Hmm.
Um, when I was with my art teacher, I had my first art show in last November in a local gallery, and the photo collages I made were actually of me in the throes of migraine, sort of carrying on thematically through my work. Um, and those photos are not flattering, to say the
Right.
least. And I'm devoid of glam. There's no lip gloss. Uh, there's no joy, right? And in the taking of those. Um, and one of the reasons I guess I work with them so much is because I feel like I need to fix something about them after I see them.
Migraines blur and bumble. Migraines stir and stumble. Migraines unravel the imagination, and migraines dismantle the nervous system. I invite you on a journey with me to explore migraine as a sensory perspective, and as this film is a living artifact. By viewing it, you become part of the story.
If I just blur, oh, I've got some acne or age spots or, freckles or it's really, I feel like I need to go and touch it up. That was when I took them like a year or more ago, I I really wanted to touch them up. If I release these to the world at large, I better have to be glamorous. I mean, it's in, it's internalized by a lot of people too. How we should behave, how we should look, especially the look being
Yes.
inoffensive, 25, a
Yes.
size 2, and
Yeah.
probably white as well, because there's a lot of,
Yes,
I'm an
right?
intersectional feminist, so I know, it really, I mean, I don't want to go on a rant. I do apologize. I'm just saying that I think
No, no,
there's
I
so much.
agree with you. I agree with you that, and I believe, I'm wondering, that's a question to pose to many a woman. How many times do you have photographs that say, oh, they need to be repaired, they need to be fixed, this needs to be changed, and, things that perhaps maybe can't be changed because I don't know if it's that we're not happy with ourselves or we're not, or we're concerned that the powers that be will judge us. Not that you know what I mean? Not, we're not saying, oh, I'm not happy with myself and I need this fixed, but more saying that the world at large may judge us for what they see, and that won't wash. Like in our own personal world, we're fine, but that won't wash with what's out on the planet. And I'm wondering how many people
Exactly.
do that and then
I
judge
think it's
themselves, right?
awful.
Some may judge, right? Some may judge themselves too because of that. And I think that what you're doing with the concept of media and the digital world and the internet and addressing those issues, it's so powerful.
Thanks so much. I definitely have to say it was something I wasn't feeling it made me so uncomfortable. I felt like I had to talk about it and then explore it, if that makes sense. Even now, I'm getting a little bit, nervous just thinking about how my photos and my media, even though I don't have social media, are
Right.
out there to be observed and judged and perceived, um, or ignored, you know, and
Hmm.
it's harrowing. And I think maybe because just to mention other artists, I think a little bit. When I was really, really young, I discovered Frida Kahlo and Claude Cahun, and it really, really, both of their works really spoke to me. When I was not even 20 years old, I discovered them, and I fell in love with surrealism and that time period for women,
Hmm.
for female artists. And I think what I love about both of them is they're not afraid to be present in what they create, and they're
Hmm.
quite literally part of it. Kala dreaming of herself as part of the organic world, literally at large, a flower, another person, an animal. I mean, Claude Cahun assuming all sorts of gender identities that confront, that unsettle.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's anything glam. I'm not saying it's not glamorous on some level to be yourself, but it's really, to pardon the term, there's some gravitas. And when I was a very young person, um, unsure about my gender presentation and my gender identity, and unsure about myself as a queer person in the world, um, those works really spoke to me.
Hmm.
And it's something as a part of that community and those antecedents. I like to experiment with identity in ways that I think are unsettling to me. I'm not sure if it unsettles anybody else, but it's a little confrontational. It's a little bit, I think, you know.
You're exploring it because you want to explore it. And as an artist, you have a right to, correct? I mean, that's just really what it's all about. You're
I
you're exploring what you want to explore.
Yes, and as a feminist, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it's really important also to. I'm really happy about the fact that I don't have the last word on anything. That there's always another question, or there's always going to be a challenge, or there's always going to be, you know, don't worry about the haters, but there's always going to be a new adventure for my creativity to take as a problem solving process, as a tool that I can deploy as a feminist to look at the world,
So now how does,
challenge it.
since you're really not out on social media and but your voice, you're letting your voice be known. How is it that people are seeing your work? I happen to see it because it was sent to me. And so how is it that people get a chance to see your work other than in a gallery? Because of course, if your artwork is not presenting itself to galleries all over the world, how does one get to see that? How do you, and then also how do you deal with that? How do you work that out to be seen
That's
and
a
not
great
seen?
question. To be seen and not seen. I struggled with. I mean, as it's clearly obvious, I'm still struggling with creating social media for my artist self, and something that my art teacher Lauren Curtis and I have talked about a lot, and something that she's mentoring me through, and she has been really supportive for years about the fact that I've been hesitantly exploring which platform to go towards and how to create the self, because honestly I have the WordPress site. That's my sole in Vimeo, where my
Mhm,
film
yeah.
is. And I was another way to see my work is the Center for Creative and the Center for Media and Celebrity Studies in Toronto, Canada,
Hmm.
was founded by a friend of mine, Dr. Smita and Andy. She was kind enough to feature my first film in her film festival, and it did get an honorable mention, actually, not to be
Congratulations.
vaunting too much. Thank you. It was so good of her. So I have been part of it's been a few years now, but I was invited to be on guest panels discussing other folks' indie creations, especially folks who, are usually on the outside looking in or critiquing something. But how do you critique something and then not create it? I think a lot of academics especially struggle with that.
Mm.
And so I'm exploring this year. This is the year I return to social media. It's not in caps or bold print,
Mm.
but I'm going to need to return to social media if I continue to evolve and grow. I need to grow the self online.
Well, we'll be looking
And
forward to it because then we can see it all over the world, right? I mean, I as an observer of art love to see things online. I love to go to the people's shops. I
so
love
much.
to see their work. I mean, that's just, I guess, how we evolve also, right? We grow, we evolve,
Yeah.
we learn. And so I'm thrilled to hear that. But I would like to ask you, how do you view
Sure.
your art? Do you feel that your art is healing? Because I know that you mentioned that you have an illness, and I know of the
Yeah.
migraines. And so do you
Yeah.
feel that it was healing to, first of all, do you feel that it was healing to do your film about the migraines? Because I found it fascinating.
Thank you so much. I I really did find it healing when I submitted it and then actually participated in the festival and heard other folks besides me discussing it, and the fact that it resonated with something. Didn't have to be the same thing. I know there were multiple things going on, but it really I was comfortable with other folks discussing it, but not myself, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yes.
And I find that it's almost like with filmmaking, I'm discovering that the creative process is very harrowing. It's very
Mhm.
narrowing. It's limiting. It's kind of, I mean, I came to it very late to the party at 48 or 49 when I
Hmm.
wrote my first film. So it is healing. It's just I'm getting used to that medium. And now that I look at it, I watched it a few months back. It is healing actually because it's begun conversations, and that's great for me because
Hmm.
I feel like as an artist, that's I mean I could just say this. I do with accessibility, and I'm
Yes.
a as an artist, that's I don't want to flex or anything. I've got a lot of diseases, and I have I'm immunocompromised. So
Mhm.
when the pandemic hit, especially when
Yes.
a lot of us changed, a lot of us. I mean, we all shed skin.
Right.
Um, the isolation that was maybe 2/4 of the time for me became years where I didn't see friends
Mhm.
because of my whole household actually is compromised. So
Right.
it's really uh it's really helped me reconnect
Mhm.
with the world. So I like that my art's done that for me. So that for me is healing too.
Right. But it's funny that you say that because it is a double-edged sword, right? As a therapist, and I use art with clients, it's healing to do the art, to sit and create. But
Right.
on the other hand, if you have to produce the art, if it needs to be gotten out there, if it becomes more or less a job, then it can be very stressful at the same time, right?
Exactly.
It's
I
a give
agree.
and take for an artist, for an artist. I mean, someone who comes and they're just using it, they're just relaxing, they're enjoying it to heal, to relax, to meditate, that's one thing. But if you are an artist, I find that it very definitely is a double-edged sword because that's your livelihood. And so you do have stress at the same time. And filmmaking, especially, because I'm assuming that it's very technical, even though it's very artistic, it's very technical at the same time. And I would think that, like for me, that would be a lot. That would be very stressful.
I can assure you it is. And I it was I guess maybe I can say this too about accessibility about the filmmaking process since you raised that idea. So because I'm polyarthritic, my hands shake, and yet I make jewelry, I sew. I hold my phone that I'm talking to you on now. That's my main filmmaking device.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember when I was going to make my first film, when Lauren and my teacher and I were sitting and discussing how to present,
Hmm.
how to edit, because I was teaching myself, like with her input, of course, and support. I was teaching myself editing and all. So essentially, she said, I said, well, I can't. I said, the problem is my hands are shaking, and those a few years ago was much worse. So my hands are shaking so much
Hmm.
that I can't hold the camera for long. And I also, not to, but just to give an idea, I use a walker too. So standing is really, it's challenging. It's not impossible, but you can't stand for long periods of time. The migraines create vertigo and blurred vision. So how do I, not fall over and then begin
Right. And
again?
how
So
do you
she's
hold yourself in film, right? How do you make sure that you're securely holding yourself in film, even if you put the camera or the phone in your instance, on a surface, how do you manipulate it to start it, to stop it? I mean, these are difficult things. I find it amazing that you're doing all this work.
Thank you so much. It's been a learning curve, and I'm glad that I'm learning what I can do and differently do it because luckily I have support. And when she suggested that I take all the main photographs that I wanted to explore in the film as slides, she said, "Why don't you just paste them on your wall and then take you could pan from one." And I thought that's I don't have to edit as much, so my hands will be sore. I don't have to bend over my phone, so my eyes won't hurt. Um, and it really helped me discover accessibility as an artist. Really taught me something, more than one thing, about how it's possible to do things differently. It really is. I'm
And I
still
like that you say
relearning how to
that.
put.
I like that
Thank
you
you
say
so
that
much.
to learn how to do things differently, because then that opens a world to so many people out there that are listening, that they can in fact learn how to do whatever it is that they want to do differently, because it shouldn't stop anybody, right? You can't, you may not necessarily do it the way many people do it, but you can do it your own way so that you just do it.
That's exactly. It reminds me of a couple of years ago when I was in occupational and physical therapy. I said to my occupational therapist, I said, it's been like 2 years since I've made any jewelry because I got the short version is in 21 I was very sick, had multiple hospitalizations, and my life changed. There's a lot more behind it, but my life really, I was already chronically ill, had many a complaint, but this really changed it. It really changed my life, and I had to relearn a lot of things I thought I knew. And so I said to her, I want to create jewelry, but I work with delicate vintage
Mhm.
objects and items. So my hand shakes, it breaks. There's glue, really thin,
Mhm.
a thin line of glue will go all over my palm. And then, my hand shakes, so I drop things all the time. How do I? And she said, bring some in and we'll do it. And I'll put that in my notes, and I'll note this as a clinical visit, and we'll do it together. And I said,
Oh,
oh,
nice. Yeah.
okay. I was feeling really self-conscious about it, but it was so much fun that I'm relearning a lot of things. But I mentioned that I know it's not happening in a vacuum. I've had support, and a lot of this stuff has given me opportunities to ask for help,
Mm.
to admit that I need help, and to pursue, again, doing things differently and being okay with that.
Exactly, because that's the important part, because you want to fulfill your dreams, your wishes, your your likes, right? Your likes, your loves. And so to learn how to do it differently is important. And the mere fact that we understand that we can do it differently, because sometimes I think that that makes people fearful when they fear that they can no longer do what they enjoy doing, what they love doing. But it does have to be learned a different way, but that's okay. And I like the idea
It's
that
okay.
the physical therapist said to bring it in, because that's a form of, I mean, it's a fine motor skill kind of coordination. So that was fabulous that it could be done that way. But I have to say that you're very brave for taking on all of this while being dealing with health and wellness. for yourself and you're still moving forward. So I think that this is very brave. Also to come on the show and to talk to people about it and to show and be a living testament to people that they can in fact do whatever it is that they want to do.
Thanks. Yeah, I really, I mean, or the creative process, whether it be I write poetry, to, not surprisingly, I do a different media, and it brings me a lot of joy. And because I was able to, because I also work with a fabulous art teacher, and I would say to her, here's what I'm working with right now that I can do, but I also am struggling with other things. Rethinking just how it's even conceptualized can really change a lot. I think for me it does. I know it's different for everyone, and that's all and valid and valuable. But I think for me, art really, I'm relearning what I would like to do and things I never thought I would do. You know.
And so
It's
now, let me
really,
ask you, are you working on anything now in particular? Are you currently working on any projects?
well, since you asked, yes, thank you for asking. I know I'm a bit silly and self-deprecating, but yes, I have plans. I'm working. I'm trying to say, I've told Lauren this, my art teacher, that I say it with a straight face. It's hard to, because I don't take myself that seriously, as you've seen. Yeah, I'm working on my second film, something I never thought I'd say, ever. I never thought I'd say I'm working on my first film. And I know I'm, being a hype girl for other folks, but if it wasn't for my art teacher's support and other, clinicians I was working with,
Right.
and then the friend who founded the film festival for CMCS saying, Andie, we're on Zoom talking about various things, and she said, I think it's something like, I think you should make a film about it. And I was like, who needs my, who needs my input? But I think it's also when you're sick, you're invisible a lot of the time. Well, as women, we're invisible.
In general, yes. And especially older women, right? Older women were very invisible.
Exactly. I've said to other friends actually that there was a point where I had many doctor's appointments. And I was it was like a check-in at my, I think, primary care physician. And it was a resident, and he said, oh, I see you're 42 years young. And I actually was like, where's my cane so I can clobber? Never mind. But it was really, it's not smooth. It's not cute. I find it very patronizing. And that's me. I know that's not everyone's perspective, but it's very, it's something that constantly, as someone who's, I'm a femme them, so I'm non-binary, but I do identify with my feminine presentation often, and that identity often. That the more femininity I evoke in myself, the more invisible I become. But I blend in with the furniture. The more sick I show, like my walker, my canes, my mask now, because we're out of, thankfully, the
Yes.
the pandemic itself. Suddenly, that's evoking a lot of scrutiny. And it's constant. I mean, that's maybe why I thought about doing another film. So I have a few ideas for films, but I'm really curious about being invisible in a general space. And if you're not blending in, what does that mean for you as a feminine identified person? Or as a woman, if we're not invisible, if we're not blending in, what are we doing? And who are we? Because I really feel like there are guidelines for defying patriarchy.
Mhm.
Thankfully, we have a lot of, antecedents that we can look to. But it's kind of exhausting to live up to all these expectations. And I know I've internalized them too. So really something that I try to play with as
Mhm.
something I can engage with confrontationally through a context of play or context of um, especially a digital self, because there's endless ideas for maybe how to
Yes.
redesign ourselves, right?
Well,
Um,
yes. And I did find that interesting when you said, we speak about authenticity and authentically ourselves, and yet is that digital version us or not us, right? Is that really the authentic self, or what is that image? What does that image, and then
ex-
also what does that image signify, right? Or what does that image say to the world?
and how important is it for us to
Mhm.
convey that self to others? Um, because I think for depending on what the profession or vocation you have,
Mhm.
it says a lot of different things to different people, depending on who you are. And I I think like I was thinking of maybe this is just recently doing a film about vague booking, but I wonder how I do that because it's so subliminal, it's absurd. It's not. It's an in joke that is now it's 1,000 years old. Nobody can knows the punchline anymore.
Right.
It's so without context. Um, and I think because we're a visually driven digital society now, where emojis are a language basically, and they have been a language for more than a decade.
Mm.
Um, text speak.
Yes.
There's there's all sorts of there's already so many communication modules that allow a different self to creep out or multiple selves, and that's kind of
Mhm.
powerful stuff. I'm I think authenticity and digital selves are really they're at odds a lot of the time, I think.
Mhm. Do you think that
I wonder
anybody
about
out
that.
there, yeah, I mean, I do, I found that interesting when you said that, but I wonder, do you think that there are many or anybody out there that really is themselves the same way all the time? I mean, I would think that that's hard, right, to be.
It's hard. And you evolve and grow. I mean, I was just saying that 30 minutes ago, so I
Right.
must agree, fundamentally. And I think what it might be? It might be, but well, for one, I haven't had social media except for a WordPress site for 5 years. But also, I was thinking that when I had social media, um, I I really was just like I used it as background or to use Messenger on Facebook,
Mm.
sometimes for professional reasons. And because there was a crossover at the time between, and now there would be, I guess now too, professional and personal,
Yes.
I I was very I curated myself heavily on at least one platform. Instagram, I think my old Instagram was a lot of photos of me and friends and just, not
Mhm.
as many connections. But it's definitely it's something I still struggle with a bit because I'm not sure how I'm going to grow, tomorrow even.
Mhm.
So what do you do about that? I'm
Well, I
still
certainly look
learning.
forward to that film. I certainly look forward to your film and more films to come
Thank
because you pose a lot of interesting questions, especially with what we're
you.
doing today. I mean, we're actually speaking through technology and we're,
Right.
on a platform that I'm trying to give a platform to people to express themselves, to speak their true voice or let their true voice be heard, because oftentimes we know that that doesn't happen because often
That's
it's
right.
monitored. And of course,
That's right.
I'm doing it through a platform that, for all intents and purposes, I can only have the person reveal their true self as long as the platform allows me to, because I don't own the platform. So that too comes into play.
Right.
But you definitely pose so many interesting questions, especially the way in which we're going and evolving on the planet. And also
Thanks.
how much responsibility we have, right? The responsibility to pose those questions. Because I think that we really do. And that's my opinion, that we really do have responsibility to pose those questions. And artists like you that
Too.
are posing them and asking other questions and having conversations about that. I think it's marvelous that you're doing this.
Thanks so much. I really try to, I do try to use my art as a conversation, basically. And I think it's, you know, because others before me, thankfully, have also done that to really interesting results as well. You know, I think and are doing it currently, which is so fascinating to me. Um, I can't wait to see how our digital selves grow tomorrow, even. Um, I know we're getting really meta,
Yes.
but but I think it's important sometimes to, be in the moment and really think that realize we're not alone, so we have
Right.
responsibility. That's all, you know.
Well, I do want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and speak to the audience today and to discuss some of your work. I hope people will look for your films out there. I can't wait for your next one. I hope you let me know
Thank you so
personally when
much.
it comes out. And
Oh,
again, I
thanks.
thank you. I thank Lauren Curtis for introducing us, um,
Thanks so
because
much.
I was so happy that you could come on. And I thank you very much, Andie.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thanks again for your time. Your wonderful chat. Thanks again.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you.